It started with a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. My wife, Laura, had been acting differently, distant, secretive, and overly protective of her phone. When she announced a work trip last week, the alarm bells in my head rang louder than ever. She rarely traveled for work, and this sudden trip seemed suspiciously convenient. The night before her departure, I noticed her packing with an unusual level of care, choosing outfits that seemed more suited for a romantic getaway than a corporate meeting. I asked casual questions, trying to gauge her reaction, but her responses were clipped and defensive. "Are you grilling me, Nathan?" she snapped. "It's just a work trip." I forced a smile, hiding my unease, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I decided to dig deeper, starting with her work schedule. A quick call to her office the next morning confirmed my worst fears. There was no work trip planned for her team. I couldn't let it slide. Gripping my phone, I called an old friend who worked in private investigations. "Follow her," I said, my voice heavy with dread. Hours later, I received the address of a downtown hotel, along with photos that shattered my world. My wife wasn't just lying, she was meeting someone. My heart raced as I sat in my car, parked just outside the hotel my investigator had identified. The crisp night air seeped through the window, but the chill I felt wasn't from the cold. It was the icy realization that my marriage might be built on lies. I glanced at the photos again. Laura, dressed in a sleek black dress I didn't recognize, walking into the hotel lobby with a tall, well-dressed man. Her boss. I clenched the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. There was no turning back now. I wasn't here for confrontation, at least not yet. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that would cut through any excuses she might concoct. Minutes felt like hours as I watched the hotel entrance. A part of me hoped she'd walk out alone, as if this was all just a big misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. The way she had been slipping out of bed late at night to text, the sudden extra hours at work, the distant kisses that felt more like obligations. All of it pointed to this moment. Then, as if on cue, I saw her through the lobby's glass doors. She was laughing, her hand brushing against her boss's arm as they waited for the elevator. My stomach twisted in knots, but I forced myself to stay calm. I grabbed my phone and began recording. "Don't lose focus," I muttered to myself, stepping out of the car. I made my way into the hotel, keeping a safe distance. The air inside was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold knot forming in my chest. I pretended to check my phone as I waited for the elevator to ding. It opened. Empty. I quickly slipped inside, my heart pounding. On a hunch, I pressed the button for the top floor. The investigator had mentioned seeing them head toward the luxury suites. As the elevator ascended, I rehearsed what I'd do next. I couldn't just burst in. If this was going to end, it needed to end with clarity, not chaos. The elevator opened to a hushed hallway, lined with plush carpeting and dimly lit sconces. I took a deep breath and stepped out. The investigator had sent me the suite number, but seeing it in person made it feel all too real. Room 1125. I approached the door cautiously, my steps silent against the carpet. Voices murmured on the other side, faint but unmistakable. Her laughter, carefree and unburdened, pierced me like a knife. I leaned in closer, my phone camera ready. The door wasn't fully closed. A slight gap gave me a glimpse of the scene inside. Laura, seated on the couch, her hand resting on her boss's thigh. Champagne glasses sparkled on the coffee table, untouched. My grip on the phone tightened as I began to record. I knew this was only the beginning. Confrontation could wait. For now, I needed to capture every word, every lie she thought she could hide behind. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about the truth finally coming to light. I crouched outside the door, my heart pounding louder than ever. The weight of the moment threatened to crush me, but I had to stay focused. This wasn't the time for an emotional breakdown. I needed to stay sharp, to capture everything. With my phone poised and recording, I adjusted the angle to get a clearer shot through the crack in the door. Inside, Laura leaned back on the couch, her laugh light and familiar. But hearing it in this context made my stomach churn. Her boss, a man I only knew from brief mentions in conversation, sat close beside her, his arm draped casually across the back of the couch. Their body language told the story I had dreaded. A story of intimacy, of betrayal. "You really outdid yourself this time," Laura said, lifting her glass of champagne. Her smile was dazzling, the one she used to save for me. "This suite is incredible. Only the best for you," her boss replied, his voice smooth and confident. "You deserve it, Laura. You've been working so hard, both at the office and here." They both laughed, and I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. My hands shook as I adjusted my grip on the phone. Every word was another stab to the heart, but I couldn't stop. This was the evidence I needed. "You're too good to me," Laura said, leaning in closer to him. The way she looked at him, it wasn't just physical. It was the kind of affection I hadn't seen in her eyes for months. I wanted to burst in, to confront them both right then and there. But I forced myself to stay rooted in place. Confrontation without proof could easily backfire. She'd twist the narrative, turn the tables, claim it was all a misunderstanding. No, I needed this, every second of it. Then their conversation shifted, taking a turn that made my blood boil even more. "What about Nathan?" her boss asked, his tone casual but probing. Laura waved dismissively. "He has no idea. Honestly, he's been so oblivious lately, it's almost laughable. As long as I keep playing the loving wife, he'll never suspect a thing." I clenched my jaw so tightly it hurt. Oblivious? I had seen every change, every crack in the foundation of our marriage, and I was here now because I refused to be blind. "What if he finds out?" her boss pressed. "Won't," she replied confidently, taking another sip of champagne. "Even if he did, he's too weak to do anything about it." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, but they also steeled my resolve. Weak? She'd underestimated me. She thought I'd let this slide, but she was wrong. As they leaned in for a kiss, I stopped the recording. I had everything I needed. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete mockery of everything we'd built together. And now, it was time for me to decide my next move. As I slipped back to the elevator, the weight of what I had witnessed threatened to crush me. Every step I took away from that door felt like walking through quicksand. My hands were still trembling as I reviewed the video on my phone. It was all there. Her words, her laughter, her betrayal. Yet somehow, seeing it didn't make it easy. The elevator ride down felt interminable. My reflection in the mirrored walls revealed a man I barely recognized. Eyes hollow, jaw clenched, and shoulders slumped. It was hard to reconcile this image with the man I thought I was just a day ago. As the elevator dinged and the doors opened into the lobby, I steadied myself. There was no room for breaking down yet. Back in the car, I sat in silence for a long time. The streets outside were quiet, the soft glow of street lights casting shadows across the dashboard. I replayed their conversation in my mind, the mocking tone in Laura's voice, the way she dismissed me as if I were some insignificant obstacle in her life. Weak? No, I wasn't weak. If anything, her words fueled the fire burning inside me. But anger wasn't enough. This wasn't just about confronting her. It was about exposing her lies in a way that left no room for manipulation or excuses. I reached for my laptop in the passenger seat and transferred the recording from my phone. I watched it again, pausing at moments that cut the deepest. Her hand on his thigh, her casual dismissal of me as clueless, and the final nail in the coffin. Oh, the kiss. I made copies of the file and stored them in multiple places. If Laura thought she could outmaneuver me, she was in for a rude awakening. But what now? The urge to confront her immediately was overwhelming, but I knew it would only escalate into a shouting match, and she might find a way to twist the narrative. I needed to be smart, deliberate. She had no idea I was onto her, and I intended to keep it that way. At least for now. As the plan began to form in my mind, I scrolled through my contacts and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, my lawyer. It was late, but this wasn't something that could wait. After a few rings, he answered groggily. "Who is this?" "It's Nathan," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need your help. It's about Laura." The silence on the other end stretched for a moment before he spoke again, his tone sharp and alert. "What's going on?" "Let's just say I have proof she's been unfaithful," I replied, my words laced with cold determination. "And I need to know how to protect myself, legally and financially." The conversation that followed laid the groundwork for my next steps. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring Laura couldn't destroy me in the aftermath. After speaking with my lawyer, I drove home in a haze of emotions. Anger, sadness, and an odd sense of clarity. I wasn't sure how I managed to get through the drive without running a red light or slamming on the brakes. My mind raced with thoughts of how to approach Laura, how to take the next steps without her suspecting I was already 10 steps ahead. When I walked into the house, it was eerily quiet. Her scent lingered faintly in the air, a mix of her favorite perfume and shampoo. Everything in the house screamed of normalcy. The cozy throw blanket on the couch, the framed wedding photo on the mantel, the coffee cup she had left on the kitchen counter before her work trip. It was like stepping into the set of a play where the actors had gone home, leaving behind only the props. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the photo. Laura and I looked so happy in it, oblivious to the storm that would come years later. How long had she been deceiving me? Was this affair a recent fling, or had she been living this double life for months? Maybe even years. The questions burned in my mind, but I knew I couldn't dwell on them now. Instead, I needed to focus on my plan. My lawyer had advised me to gather all financial records, account for shared assets, and monitor any unusual transactions. If Laura was as careless in other areas as she was in hiding her affair, there might be clues in our finances. I powered up my laptop and logged into our shared accounts. Sure enough, recent charges raised red flags. Expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together, boutique hotel stays in the city, and even a high-end jewelry store. My stomach churned as I realized that some of the money she was using to impress her boss had come from my hard-earned savings. Each new discovery felt like another betrayal, but it also added fuel to my resolve. I printed the statements, added them to a growing folder of evidence, and double-checked that everything was backed up. If this was going to end in a confrontation, I wanted to be armed with more than just words. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. Exhaustion crept in, but sleep felt impossible. I paced the house, my mind spinning. How would Laura react when she realized I knew everything? Would she try to deny it, or would she finally drop the facade? I sat on the edge of the bed we had shared for years, the bed that now felt tainted by her betrayal. A wave of sadness washed over me, but I pushed it aside. There would be time to grieve later. For now, I needed to focus on the calm before the storm. Tomorrow, Laura would return home. She would walk through the door, likely carrying the same confident air she had in the hotel suite. Little did she know, everything was about to change. The next day, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Laura was due back in the afternoon, and I wasn't sure how I would manage to act normal when I saw her. Every corner of the house felt like a reminder of the life we had built together, a life she had so carelessly discarded. But I reminded myself that this wasn't the time to lose control. If I confronted her too soon, she'd deny everything. I had to stick to the plan. I spent the morning going over the evidence again, not to question it, but to steel myself for what was coming. The recordings, the photos, the financial statements, they all painted an unflinching picture of her betrayal. Yet, as much as I hated her for what she had done, I couldn't shake the love I still felt. That was the hardest part. When Laura finally arrived, the sound of her car pulling into the driveway jolted me out of my thoughts. I quickly stashed the folder of evidence in my office and tried to compose myself. The door opened, and there she was, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Hey, honey," she called out, wheeling her suitcase inside. "I'm back." Her voice grated against my nerves, but I forced a smile. "Welcome home. How was the trip?" "Oh, exhausting," she said, dropping her bag by the stairs. "Back-to-back meetings. You know how it is." Her casual tone made my blood boil. How could she lie so effortlessly? Still, I nodded, pretending to buy her story. "I bet you're tired," I said, keeping my voice even. "Why don't I make you some tea?" She looked at me, surprised. "That's sweet of you, thanks." As I prepared the tea, I kept stealing glances at her. She seemed so relaxed, scrolling through her phone while sitting on the couch. I wondered if she was texting him, replaying moments from their time together. The thought sent a fresh wave of anger through me, but I pushed it down. I handed her the tea and sat across from her, watching as she took a sip. "Did anything interesting happen while you were away?" I asked, testing the waters. She shook her head, not missing a beat. "Not really, just work, work, work." Her lie was like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned back and nodded. Must have been a lot of work to explain those hotel charges and dinners to the company. She froze, her eyes darting up to meet mine. For a split second, there was panic in her expression, but she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning confusion. I held her gaze, my voice calm, but laced with steel. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Laura." The color drained from her face. She set the tea down, her hands trembling slightly. The facade she had so carefully maintained was beginning to crack, and I knew the moment of truth was fast approaching. Laura's face turned pale. her hands gripping the edge of the couch as though she were bracing for impact. I could see the wheels turning in her head, her mind scrambling for an explanation, a lifeline to cling to. But I wasn't about to give her one. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly but still attempting to sound casual. "What hotel charges? You've got it wrong." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, locking eyes with her. "Don't play dumb, Laura. I know where you were. I know who you were with. And I know it wasn't a work trip." Her eyes widened for just a moment before she forced a laugh, but the nervous edge in it was unmistakable. "Nathan, what are you even talking about? You're acting crazy." "Crazy," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Let me show you what crazy looks like." I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of her laughter, her voice dripping with affection as she spoke to her boss in that luxury hotel suite. I didn't say a word as I watched her reaction, her face crumbling with every passing second. "Nathan," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "Don't insult me by trying to deny it. I have the video. I have the photos. I have the receipts. And I have your words, your exact words about how I'm too weak to figure it out. So go on, Laura. Explain this to me." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stammered, It's not what it looks like." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Not what it looks like? Then please enlighten me. What exactly is it, Laura? A business meeting? A networking opportunity? Or were you just giving him moral support while sipping champagne in a hotel suite?" Her tears began to fall, but they didn't move me. This wasn't remorse, it was panic. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, she was sorry she'd been caught. "It was a mistake," she choked out, her voice trembling. "I never meant for it to go this far. Please, Nathan, let's talk about this." "You want to talk?" I said, my voice rising. "Now you want to talk? After months of lying to my face, after mocking me behind my back, now you suddenly want to have a conversation?" She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me," I snapped. "You don't get to act like the victim here, Laura. You did this. You destroyed us." Her sobs grew louder, but I remained unmoved. This wasn't the woman I thought I'd married. This was someone who had taken my trust and crushed it beneath her feet. For the first time, Laura had no words. Her lies had run out, and all that remained was the truth staring her in the face. Laura's sobs echoed in the silence of the room, but they didn't stir the sympathy in me they once might have. Instead, they sounded hollow, as if she were crying more for herself than for what she had done to us. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment hang between us. "I never thought we'd come to this," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. "I never thought you'd be capable of this." She looked up, her tear-streaked face a portrait of desperation. "Nathan, please, we can fix this. I know I messed up, but we can work through it. I still love you. "Don't say that," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Don't you dare use those words to manipulate me. Love? Is that what you called this?" I gestured toward my phone, still playing the damning recording. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, it seemed like she had nothing left to say. "I gave you everything," I continued, my tone cold. "I trusted you. I believed in us. And you threw it all away for... what? A fling? A thrill? Was it worth it, Laura? Was he worth it?" She shook her head frantically. "It wasn't like that. I was lonely, Nathan. You've been so distant, so busy with work. I felt invisible, and he made me feel alive again." I laughed bitterly. the sound devoid of humor. "So it's my fault now? You're blaming me for your betrayal?" "No, that's not what I mean," she cried. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But it doesn't have to end like this. Please, we can fix this." Her words hung in the air, but I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street. My mind raced, torn between the memories of the life we had built together and the undeniable reality of her betrayal. Finally, I turned back to her, my decision made. "You're right about one thing," I said. "It doesn't have to end like this, but it is going to end. I can't be with someone who looks me in the eye and lies so easily. I can't be with someone who doesn't value what we had." I shook my head, my voice calm but resolute. "It's too late, Laura. I'm not staying in a marriage where I'm a second choice, a fallback plan. You made your decision, and now I'm making mine." I turned and walked toward the door, grabbing the folder of evidence as I went. She didn't follow me, just sat there, sobbing into her hands. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, and for the first time in months, I felt free. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but it was the one I needed.